Okay, let's dive into this. Welcome to today's explainer. You know, gardening is so often sold to us as this totally idyllic, peaceful hobby, right? Like you just pop a little plant in the dirt, step back, and watch the magic happen. But honestly, anyone who's actually tried to keep a plant alive knows that nature totally has a mind of its own. So today, we're looking at a really beautifully documented trial and error from a gardener named Ang. We're going to break down Ang's exact notes from a gardening journal to explore a classic conflict: what we expect a plant to do versus what that plant actually demands from us. It's this brilliant little micro-study in adaptability, and we're mapping out that entire journey right now. So I've got to ask, are you a hands-off gardener? Like, do you prefer the whole set it and forget it method? Because let's be real, it's incredibly tempting, isn't it? We all kind of love the idea of low-maintenance investments. Whether that's in our gardens, our homes, or just our daily routines, we generally want maximum output with minimum input. And that universal desire for a low-maintenance, totally hands-off approach, that is the exact core theme of our story today. It's the baseline philosophy that our gardener, Ang, brought right to the garden bed. So kind of keep your own preferences in mind as we look at how this philosophy actually held up against reality.
And here is the absolute star of our explainer today, the Mealycup Sage, or, scientifically known as salvia-farinacea. What I think is just so wonderful about this story is the sheer casualness of how it all began. Ang didn't go on some massive, grand botanical expedition to find this plant. Nope, Ang actually discovered this specific specimen during a totally routine grocery run. It's just a perfect reminder that sometimes the most complex little projects start right there in the produce or floral aisle of your local supermarket. It caught Ang's eye, and bam, an impromptu gardening experiment was born.
Now, Ang didn't just buy one plant. The experiment actually started with exactly 2 of these specimens, which was documented in a past journal entry, specifically Part 811. But, Ang didn't just buy 2 so they'd have a cute matching pair. There was actually a very specific calculated methodology going on here. Ang wanted to test these 2 specimens across different microclimates within the garden. And honestly, it's a fantastic, super structured way to learn. You take 2 identical plants, place them in slightly different environmental conditions, and just observe how they adapt to the specific gardening style you apply to them.
So the crucial point is this quote right here. Ang's plan was literally to, quote, leave them to grow on their own with only the occasional watering. I mean, that is the ultimate definition of the hands-off approach we were just talking about. Ang's entire gardening style with these 2 specimens was completely predicated on leaving them strictly alone, taking a huge step back and just providing an occasional drink of water. It's basically the dream scenario for any busy person who wants a gorgeous garden without all that backbreaking labor. But, well, as we're about to see, nature doesn't always read the script we write for it.
Because on paper, the Mealycup Sage sounds like the absolute ultimate low-maintenance dream. I mean, it loves full sun, it is incredibly drought-tolerant, and it doesn't even need heavy fertilizing. Based on that profile, Ang's hands-off approach should have worked flawlessly, right? But yeah, there's a catch. Despite all those really tough independent traits, this plant actually comes with a major hidden cost. It requires constant pruning. If you want those really beautiful blooms and you want the plant to stay looking tidy, you absolutely cannot just walk away. The idealized traits of the plant were completely overshadowed by the very hands-on reality of cultivating it.
So a single word basically completely derailed this entire philosophy. Pruning, meaning you literally have to frequently trim the plant just to keep things tidy and encourage more of those blooms, which, if you think about it, is the exact opposite of leaving a plant to grow on its own. Ang pretty quickly realized that the initial hands-off philosophy had officially backfired. The results just simply weren't promising at all. The assumption that these plants would somehow thrive on pure neglect? Yeah, a bit too optimistic. Without this constant active maintenance, the Mealycup Sage simply does not perform. It was a pretty harsh reality check. But hey, the story doesn't end with Ang just throwing in the towel and surrendering to a life of endless pruning. Instead, we get this sudden twist. Ang decides to leave them alone for now. Now you might be wondering, why make a deliberate choice to halt the pruning? If the plant needs pruning to look good, why stop? Well, because Ang is suddenly faced with a new dilemma and a totally shifting goal. The focus moved away from keeping the plant tidy to a completely different biological objective: harvesting seeds. And to get seeds, you have to let the plant do its thing, even if it gets a little messy. It's a strategic pause in the whole maintenance routine.
So let's walk through this high-stakes plan step by step. This is essentially the micronarrative of a lazy gardener forced into a really precarious waiting game. Step 1, Ang literally has to sit back and watch those beautiful, vibrant purple flower spikes lose all their color and turn completely dry and brown, which honestly takes incredible patience. Then step 2 is the actual extraction of the seeds, and these things are remarkably tiny. And then we hit step 3, the ultimate wild card, battling the rainy season. Just as the plant is perfectly dry and finally ready for harvest, the environment decides to throw a massive obstacle right in the way.
And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer irony of gardening. Just think about it for a second. We established early on that the Mealycup Sage is a drought-tolerant plant, right? It literally thrives in dry conditions. Yet here is Ang trying to harvest from this drought-tolerant plant, and the entire process is being ruined by active, heavy rain. Add to that the fact that the seeds are just tiny, making them incredibly difficult to collect in the first place, and you've got this perfect storm of harvest hurdles. The current rainy season is literally washing away the chances of a successful seed extraction. It's this deeply relatable, mildly humorous frustration that pretty much any hobbyist can understand when the elements completely turn against you.
Which brings us to the climax of Ang's gardening saga. If seed harvesting fails, move on to propagation by cuttings. See, when the tiny seeds in the rainy season conspire to completely ruin the primary plan, a good gardener doesn't just give up. No, they execute a strategic pivot. If nature isn't going to allow a harvest of seeds, Ang will just take cuttings from the plant to force a whole new generation to grow. It is an exploration slated for the next few days, and it shows incredible resilience and adaptability. When the hands-off approach failed, Ang adapted. When the seed harvest was threatened, Ang just found another way.
So I want to leave you with a question to ponder today. What is your garden's biggest reality check? Or, if you aren't a gardener, what's the biggest reality check you've faced in your own low-maintenance hobbies? Ang's whole botanical lesson with the Mealycup Sage really teaches us that our shortcuts and our highly idealized expectations rarely actually survive contact with reality. Whether it's a plant that suddenly demands surprise pruning or a harvest ruined by some really ironic weather, the real joy, and honestly, the real learning, comes from exactly how we adapt to those hurdles. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep observing, keep adapting, and I will see you next time.